Good evening and welcome to an episode of Virtual Health Club. I am your host and the founder of NetMed Coach, Dr. Millie Lytle, and I am extremely excited to be here this evening with Dr. Dan Gartenberg, aka Dr. Snooze. He is a TED Talk resident and the founder of an amazing app called SleepSpace. And we spoke back in the fall when we were falling back. And Dr. Gartenberg, Dan, I think I'll call you if that's okay. Mentioned that the spring forward was a risky time for heart attacks, and so I asked him if he'd come back on and join, and so I realized that Sunday evening might be not the best time for a live talk, but in any case, we're recording, and so we're glad to those of you who are here, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Dan, how are you today?
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and hope we'll try to help people shift their circadian rhythms for this pending loss of an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's start with that. Let's start like the preface. Spring Forward happens a week from tonight. It's the 14th of March, 2021, when we spring forward this year. And so we're recording this on the 7th of March, 2021. Or I guess if you consider it happens on a Saturday night, then it's the Saturday, not the Sunday.
Right. So this is plenty of time. So it's a perfect time to do it because we have time to prepare for it.
Yeah, exactly. People can adjust, right?
The crux of what we talked about last time, if I remember, is in sleep science and this is like folklore and sleep science communities essentially, but we run the biggest experiment in the world essentially every time we do daylight savings. And when we lose an hour, one of the things that gets shown in when we look at the hospital data and stuff is there's a marked increase in people having a heart attack. And so that just points to the fact that even that loss of an hour can really have these strong health outcomes. And that's just one point of evidence for how sleep is related to cardiovascular disease, but there's a ton of work, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of it, on how sleep impacts cardiometabolic function. But that's just one of the things that it impacts, as you know, basically every chronic health disease. So, but the good news is that there's things that you can do beforehand to prepare for it. And most people obviously are not going to get a heart attack, but you might be maybe particularly groggy the next week, and it takes maybe some time to adjust. Usually it takes about a day or two to adjust for a 1 hour shift like this. But essentially what you'll want to do is before daylight savings, which I think is, you said Saturday? I should know this.
Yeah.
The 15th. Wait.
I know the 15th is Monday. The Saturday is the 13th.
The 13th.
And so it's the 13th into the 14th. So
like before that, you might want to try to start shifting your dinner time a little bit earlier in preparation. Maybe in like 15-minute increments going earlier on like the dinner time and the bedtime leading up to the transition, and then you'll shift more seamlessly.
Okay. So can we back up a little bit and just talk a little bit about how sleep impacts our heart health?
I mean, sure. I mean, you can check out my TED Talk where I go over this, and it's all over the media, really. It impacts every chronic health disease. My focus in particular for cancer, all the scary ones, basically. My focus is actually on Alzheimer's disease. And so what we're trying to show in a clinical trial at Penn State, and in collaboration with the University of Arizona, with this professor, Daniel Taylor and Orfeo Buxton, we're trying to demonstrate that by improving people's sleep, using this new technology that we're developing alongside of a trained clinician in cognitive behavioral therapy, that by improving people's sleep 65 plus, who have insomnia, this very fragile population, we can actually show that we can reduce their conversion to Alzheimer's disease.
And do you know what that process is, or what's happening?
Yeah, so there's a lot. The reason why we're able to get this amazing grant-funded research by the National Institute of Health, and it's a subsidiary called the National Institute of Aging, whose focus is largely on Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's-related dementias. And so, wait, what was your question again? Sorry.
How does sleep affect?
Oh yeah,
How can
so
you
the
prevent
causal
Alzheimer's with
mechanism
sleep? Mhm.
there that was flushed out in the last couple of years is that deep sleep in particular is what cleans out beta amyloid plaques that are thought to cause dementia essentially. So, you know, sleep and deep sleep in particular are basically like how our brain cleans itself out from all the toxins and crud that it takes in during the day is one way, that a simple way of thinking about it. Similar to how like your liver cleans out, you know, consuming alcohol. And so we have this cleansing that is in particular for cell, it's really important for cell recovery in deep sleep. And there's mice studies that back this up. And then they did some like fMRI where they'll actually image people's brains before and after they're sleep deprived. And they'll see some of the regions that are associated with this. I don't know all the details about that aspect. And then the other converging evidence is there's these certain biomarkers that are associated with Alzheimer's disease and people not getting enough deep sleep, essentially. And so in our study, we're actually going to do a panel of biomarkers. There's really cutting edge stuff in some of this, and do a pre-post. And if we could show this, it would be like almost like Nobel Prize worthy. We think we could, without a drug, show that we can reduce conversion to Alzheimer's disease, which I know there's so much talk about COVID and all this thing in the healthcare system right now. But before all this, the biggest cost to the healthcare system was Alzheimer's disease projected in 10 years as the baby boomers start aging out. And so that's going to be a really big problem, and it would be amazing. And all the drugs, none of the drugs so far, some of them recently have had a little bit of promise, but a lot of the drugs for Alzheimer's have not worked. And so it'd be amazing if after all this time, it wasn't a drug that solved the problem, but just getting a deeper night of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's, I mean, it's amazing how it's the simple things. We can't neglect just the basics of health in order to, we can't use a drug to account for what we're missing in our lifestyle. And so that's amazing to hear about your research.
Exactly.
So, well, congratulations on that. That's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm pumped about it. We're doing some cool, we're building some cool tech.
And so, yeah, I wonder about that mechanism, because I wonder if it's cleared through the lymph or what that detoxification mechanism is. And if that is in fact even related to other circulation of the rest of the circulatory system.
I think it probably is, but frankly, I come at it from a cognitive psychologist perspective, which is my training and background. I don't know as much about the neuroanatomy. I have other people on my team that know the neuroscience aspect of it more.
Right. Yeah, because even I remember when I was in school, like studying Alzheimer's couldn't actually be confirmed until postmortem.
Right.
Because they really had to do autopsies in order to look at these amyloid
it's
plaques.
Like the fixed cells or something. I remember.
Yeah. And now, whereas now laser and imaging has gotten to a point where we can detect it even when.
Well, I think the main indicator is actually just this blood panel, and C-reactive protein, I think, is one. I can't remember.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, so I mean, even that's okay. So even C-reactive protein is also a driver of heart disease because it's a measure of inflammation in the body, and it's produced in the liver actually, but then it circulates in the blood, and so just to kind of bring it back, I guess, a little bit to sleep, because so we definitely do know that lack of sleep, shift work is a big one that's been studied and affects if you are a shift worker, or even if you have less than 6 hours a night sleep. And I know we talked about this the last time we spoke, because you were talking about how there's people do need sleep at different hours of the day, depending on whether they're a night owl or what was the other one?
Morning lark.
Morning lark.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the
And
sleep term.
right.
And
And
that's
so
called chronotype in sleep.
chronotype.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And so depending on your chronotype says whether you're better going to bed earlier or going to bed later.
Yeah, and you can shift that. Like I'm pretty shiftable. Well, I'm naturally predisposed to night owl a little bit. And our software like gives you like a evaluation of if you're like a night owl or a morning lark and all this stuff. But you can shift it though. So especially when I was like single, I would do like late night work sessions and stuff more. And it just so happens that my partner is like a morning person. And she like synced me to a morning schedule. And the way that you do that is the scientific term to sound smart is something called Zeitgebers. So basically, which means timekeeper. And so you can start cueing yourself with meals. And this is when bringing back to shifting for the shift and circadian in the loss of the hour. It's the same process that we're doing here. We're shifting our Zeitgebers, which are sunlight, timing of exercise, timing of meals, and even like engaging intensely in like a social situation or something that's like activating, or even watching like an intense movie close to night that'll make you like not be able to sleep because your fight or flight is activated. These are all things that that I think about when I'm trying to shift my circadian rhythm either forwards or backwards.
Okay, awesome. And so, okay, so when it comes to next week, one thing that I was really surprised, actually, after you told me that statistic, I did read that there was like a Swedish study that showed that both heart attack and stroke risk are increased after the spring forward, within 2 days after the spring forward, and then it plateaus. And then researchers in the US, and so in Sweden, they showed that 8% stroke risk was increased, especially on the Monday night after this time goes forward on Saturday, and that 6.7% increase in heart attack risk, again, for the 2 days following that, the time going forward, and then it kind of plateaued in both cases for the week after. Where and then an American team tried to reproduce the study and actually found 24% increase in heart attack number cases or incidents following the spring forward.
Because the Americans are probably working their people more than the Swiss. Sorry to interject.
Yeah, no, exactly. So because part of it does come down to how, the health of one's circulatory system and how many active heart attack risk factors they have currently on the night of the spring forward.
Americans are less healthy than the Swiss too. That's probably another reason.
Yes, exactly. So we're living on a daily basis with like more risk factors, like low magnesium, increased cholesterol, although it's not just increased cholesterol, it's having increased oxidized cholesterol. So if you're a smoker, or if you're a long distance runner, or if you're exposed to more pollution, or even if you have a low nutrient dense diet, you don't have a nutrient rich diet, then you're at higher risk of having oxidized cholesterol, which creates plaque in your arteries. And then you get like this narrowing of your arteries. So there's more pressure on your heart because your heart has to pump harder in order to push blood into all the areas, and so that you get oxygen delivery to all the areas of your body. So in that case, when there's also this like stress of this like loss of sleep by apparently it's extremely significant, then you're going to get this increased number of heart attacks. So that's kind of, I thought it's really fascinating. And so
it all fits together. It all makes sense.
yeah, it does. And So can you repeat again what you said about what you do at dinner time?
So, I mean, I guess the main thing, just to sum up the solution for this, is if you're just getting the main reason why there's the increase is people are sleeping less. Um, so there's lots of ways to try to sleep more. If you really wanted to sort of get ahead of this, and you were someone maybe that does have other comorbid issues, like you have hypertension or something.
Right. Yeah, because hypertension, sleeping under 6 hours is a risk factor for higher blood pressure. People who continually sleep under 6 hours,
Exactly.
that I read. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you're one of those people, I guess what I would say to you is make sure you take a power nap and try to get a little extra sleep. Just get enough sleep. It's not rocket science. We don't, most humans, need 7 to 9 hours on a regular basis is the consensus report from the experts in the field. And most Americans don't get that. So the answer here is straightforward, and prioritize your sleep over other things, maybe even work. And that's a big thing that I try to articulate to businesses is, your people and are going to be more productive if they respect this work-life balance and entrench a healthy circadian rhythm with when they should be awake and when they should be asleep.
Have you seen any, or has your research, or have you read any research that's shown that there's been changes in our sleep patterns this past year, like throughout the COVID?
So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming out about how it impacts our dreams. And it's also basically flattening our circadian rhythm, because during the day, we're meant to be active. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to, I'm all for like almost all of the mandates that they say that my dad's like an infectious disease doctor, and I get a nice little perspective on it from him at all times. And, obviously I'm pro masks and everything. The one thing that I thought they kind of went overboard on was like the parks. Like this is like the time where like our parks should always be open, like getting like walking around during the day and being active during the day is more important than ever. And we're not getting sunlight. And obviously vitamin D plays an important role in all of this, and really getting enough sleep. And when you start getting a flattened rhythm, your sleep gets less consolidated. And It's thought to be if you're stressed, basically, it can also mess with your circadian rhythm too. And I think all of us are sort of pent up, stressed out lab rats right now. So all of these things coming together is hurting our sleep quality, and that's the one of the main things you can do. Probably, I mean, I'm a sleep scientist, so I see every. I have a hammer and I see everything as a nail. But I think it's probably the most important thing you could do for your immune system as well, is to get enough sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, studies definitely show that inflammatory markers are driven up with lack of sleep, and so then you're getting increased stress as well. Like, well, you can speak better, I'm sure, about the cortisol, but definitely like
Yeah. So
inconsistent.
basically, there's actually a healthy cortisol. You want a healthy cortisol spike in the morning. You actually want that spike in cortisol about like an hour after waking up. And when you get older, a lot of times, because of the stress and everything, you don't get that cortisol up. And so the rhythm just flattens out. So like a young person has like a strong rhythm where 2 hours afterwards they have a peak alertness, and then you'll get tired and then you'll get more alert. Whereas my grandma, for example, she'll take naps throughout the day because she has this flattened rhythm, and her body doesn't really have a good sense of when it should be active and when it shouldn't.
Yeah, and of course, cortisol has a direct effect on our immune system. I mean, it is an immune suppressant. But the
Huh.
benefit of it being, and as we know it is because of glucocorticoids and steroids and everything are based on cortisol, cortisone, of course,
Oh,
as
that makes
medication.
sense. Oh,
Yeah,
you're making
so
sense to me. Thank you. You're
and
bringing it all together for me here.
good, that's awesome. I hope you'll keep talking to me. And so, yeah, so as there's fluctuations, there's necessary fluctuations of cortisol throughout the day, which do have immunostimulating and immunosuppressing effects on our immune system. And that's healthier than always being, immune stimulated or immunosuppressed,
Right.
right? We
Right.
need
It's
those.
like fight or flight is good. It's like these things are good sometimes. It's
Yeah, it
when you're
gets us up
chronically
and active and
stressed.
thinking.
Right. Like there's a reason why like this you get pumped with this cortisol. It's healthy sometimes. It's just when we're always a little bit stressed and there's always some cortisol going on, that's when it's more problematic.
Yeah.
But one of the professors I work with, just to finally round it out to the present day with COVID a little bit, did some of the pioneering work showing that pre-vaccination, this is very relevant right now. If you sleep more this is for influenza,
Yeah.
but it probably has the same mechanisms.
Hmm.
If you get the vaccine when you're well rested, you have a better immune response, and you actually produce more antibodies than if when you get the vaccine and you had slept less the previous or couple previous nights.
Yeah, I've read that too. I've heard that on a couple of conferences as well. That sleep is
I just
the
thought that's cool.
sleep is one of the yeah sleep is one of the most important factors when it comes to vaccine response, and even I've heard side effects response as well. But you definitely, if you're going to get the vaccine, you definitely want to for it to work.
So that's why, like, honestly, I'm like not too. I mean, I try to make sure that I'm a really good sleeper. But right now I'm not being like too hard on myself with spending a little extra time in bed. Sometimes if I'm in like a work mode or something, I can get by with spending a little bit less time in bed, but I'm just kind of relaxing a little bit, observing my stressful environment and being easy on myself, and just maybe my sleep isn't quite as consolidated as it could be, but I'll either make sure I take a power nap during your circadian dip, around 2 hours after lunch if I hadn't slept enough that day, um, which I would only recommend if you don't have problems falling asleep and staying asleep. If you have problems with that, you might not want to take a nap. Or I'll just like spend like a little half hour extra in bed, and I think that's totally fine. And for me, a lot of it is just listening to my body too, and that's what I try to have people take away a lot of times when I talk to them about their sleep, which is listening to when you're tired and when you're not tired. And sleep is actually pretty consistent with like my sleep is similar from night to night if I were like look at my brain waves, but there is variability. And so like if I worked out that day a lot, for example, I might need more sleep. Or if I'm feeling a little off, I definitely make sure I sleep a lot for when that happens.
Yeah, and so for those people who are listening who don't have access to their brain waves, at least not looking at them on a screen. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Well, when I've gone into a lab, I've seen my brain waves from night to night, and I just know from looking at people's data, like because we've run like about 100 people in our study. I was surprised at how similar people's sleep is from night to night within themselves, but it's very different between people. Sleep architecture is one of the final frontiers, I think, in science.
You're gonna get there, I guess.
I'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah. Life's work's very important.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, so that made me think of the question, but now I've lost it. But basically what you're saying is that, okay, yeah, right. This is what I was going to say. I was going to say when people are stuck in this like high cortisol stress state, they're really not necessarily in tune that they need more sleep. Like they really like they don't know that they're tired because they don't feel tired. They feel hopped up, or they feel like charged, or adrenaline, or they feel
Yeah.
so
I mean,
what would
that's
you
why.
say to
Yeah.
those
Oh, sorry.
people? No,
What
that's
I,
okay.
I mean, it just makes me think of, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I like read a lot of the relevant papers and stuff. But like, um, one of the main things that predicts outcomes in for some mental health issues is basically your metacognition of the issue. And so that's why, for example, like schizophrenia can be so difficult, because like the person doesn't necessarily know that they have it. Mania can sometimes be like that a little bit too, which I think is sort of what you're touching on a little bit. And I mean, I can trigger myself into a manic. I'm not predisposition. I don't have a predisposition to mania necessarily, but definitely not biochemically. But I can definitely shift myself into a manic state, and I've done it before because of a stressful environment, for example. I think it's just to be able to know when you're in that place. Um, and I guess it requires just sort of taking a step back and being able to observe yourself, which is not something, unfortunately, that they teach you in elementary school.
No, or in college. I mean, quite frankly, they don't teach it there either.
Yeah.
You have to get a, and honestly, people should not need to get their PhD in order to understand how to objectively look at their health habits or what's hurting them.
Exactly.
We should be taught in elementary school. Um, yeah, so that's very well taken. And I guess yeah, so you can drive. So that's interesting to hear from a psychological perspective, that you can drive yourself to this manic place. And we're not talking about necessarily having bipolar either, right? We're just saying that if you experience, and I have read papers too, people who are really sleep deprived, like for instance, they go days or, without sleeping, and then they can actually trigger themselves into maybe even a semi-permanent or longer state of mania, where you are psychologically doing obsessive or compulsive activities without realizing it because you're so tired, essentially,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then it's kind of like you're just continuing more of what you're doing, which is either working or shopping or having sex or whatever the manic kind of, or gambling or whatever, like the manic
Yeah, you're in that like
behaviors
dopamine
are.
chain, and you can't get
Mhm.
out of it.
Right. And so that is definitely an interesting thing to think about, especially for people. I mean, there are enough people in this world who have experienced that, I think, and I don't know what the statistics on bipolar disorder, but it's significant, prominent
Yeah, and
disorder.
I think that for a lot of these things like depression, and I mean, almost everyone who's experienced a deep loss has experienced depression. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So situationally, these things happen all the time for people, and they're normal and healthy, actually,
Yeah.
responses to your environment. It just becomes unhealthy when you have something biochemically wrong and you can't get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the same thing for anxiety. Like, I mean, anxiety and depression often do go hand in hand, but if you're in that place where you're anxious and you can't fall asleep, or you're waking up really early, or, you need like a sedative, or then you end up kind of changing your behavior in order to change your mental state. But then it also does happen from a physical perspective too, when people they're not aware that they're driving their bodies to a place where it's unhealthy. They can't experience the state of relaxation. Like they're so stuck in that sympathetic nervous system state, the
Mhm.
fight and flight, that they can't experience the rest and digest, or they're not able to go to that place willingly, right? Which we can all do by a minute of deep breathing or something. I mean, we can
Mhm.
all switch states. I think actually that's one of the definitions of being healthy, is to be able to switch your nervous system. kind of
I mean,
easily.
it just makes me think this is why I like cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. I mean, this is why I like cognitive behavioral therapy, because you're addressing almost all of those things I think that you just mentioned, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. And that's the basic tenet of cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been applied to almost everything in psychology.
Yeah. I was supervised in cognitive behavioral therapy as well when I did a residency for a few years.
Cool.
Yeah, I practiced at the Start Clinic for Mood and Anxiety Disorders. Martin Katzman was the psychiatrist who worked there, and he was very integrative. It was in Toronto. I mean, he's still up. He's highly published. Yeah, so really cool clinic to work at. So I did practice. I mean, I've never stopped kind of practicing it, because once you're supervised in it and taught it, and then you think about it all the time as a way to approach patients. So
It's a great framework.
It is. Yeah. So which is very important for people to know, that it's like stepping back and observing how your behavior is, or how your feelings are, or what your thoughts are that drive your behaviors, or drive what the feelings are that drive the thoughts, or what the thoughts are that drive. I guess it's thoughts drive feelings, drive behaviors, right? Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, that's the cool thing about sleep, though, is like the behavioral stuff is there's a lot you can leverage with that. Because so often it's like, and that's why I encourage a lot of people to think about is there's sometimes that one thing, and it's sometimes not so obvious. Like maybe it's like the fact that you sleep with your pet in your bed, and your pet is waking you up every half hour. That's been the root. That's like one of the weird ones, but like that's been a factor before that we've helped people identify. But yeah, obviously.
And what's the solution to that?
So what I'll usually do is suggest having like a little dog bed, and trying to train them to sleep on the dog bed, so they're still with you but not in the bed. And most sleep scientists would say that they're not a proponent of animals in the bed.
Yeah,
I understand some people. I've slept with a dog in the bed before, but I understand some people, it's important to them. But there's often other solutions if that's the case too.
Okay. So basically it's like, if you're doing it, well, I do have your app. I have your app. I use your app, actually. This is
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I was just working on it today some more. So we're actually doing this vibration thing, biofeedback thing now, where we'll actually, I was actually just programming this a little bit today, where we'll measure your pulse, and then we'll do a subtle vibration in line with your pulse to try to bring down that fight or flight response, basically. And you'll do that while you're doing a meditation. And there's some science showing that can actually deepen your sleep.
That's so interesting. So is that heart rate variability, or is that?
So we're actually measuring your heart rate. And so say your heart rate is like 80 beats per minute. And then we'll start playing vibrations slightly less than that rate. And there's some evidence that sort of relaxes you and stimulates you into, I've been thinking about like resonance, like your body like has these rhythms. It kind of it primes your body into like this healthy rhythm, essentially, of relaxation, just by these subtle stimulations. And that's kind of the essence of a lot of the research and the technology that we developed with SleepSpace.
That's really cool.
So I think about it like touching consciousness. So understanding how to sort of, if you're in a light sleep, maybe you need this certain one type of, stimulation, maybe like ocean waves to block out noises that could wake you up. Whereas if you're in like a deeper state of sleep, try to prime these delta waves. And there's lots of stuff you could do in different stages of sleep to possibly optimize it. But usually before that, there's just a ton of behavioral things with just getting enough sleep and entrenching your circadian rhythm. And that's what we primarily focus on too, when we're helping people discover how they can enhance their sleep and basically dramatically improve their lives while they're at it.
So I think before you started recording, you said you you offered somebody a sleep assessment. So is that what you're talking about? When these are the kind of some of the factors involved in
Yeah,
a sleep
so
assessment?
our technology, it'll measure your sleep either with a survey, by placing your phone in your bed, by placing your phone in your nightstand, or with any wearable. So we're trying to like make a measurement tool that'll work for any sort of sleeper. And basically by measuring, that's how we can figure out what is going to work and what is not going to work. And based on that, we'll sort of place you as a certain type of sleeper. And then develop these routines for you, and we have this AI chatbot and some live sleep coaches that'll guide you on the way for your sleep journey, trying to optimize it.
Okay, I haven't used that feature actually. I've been using your app for about I think 7 months or something like that. I really like it. I mean,
Oh,
sometimes
thank you.
yeah, I really do. It's actually the only sleep app that hasn't annoyed me, for one thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. You have no idea. But if you hit Dr. Snooze
Mm-hmm.
on the app, it's the second tab.
Yeah.
And if you click Ask Dr. Snooze,
Yeah.
there's like an AI chatbot that you can query, and it'll give you a lot of the low-hanging fruit solutions to your sleep issues.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I have tapped all of those things before, but then I've never actually asked a question. I mean, overall, my
Oh yeah,
sleep's
there's a
good.
live person at the other end of the line.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that's
FYI.
good to know. Yeah, like what I find is that I change my, whatever music or whatever prompt I want before bed, but I do like that. And then for a long time, so I love the Brahms lullaby. I mean, that's definitely one of my favorites.
Oh really?
Yeah, but I've been getting into some of the meditations too. Um, like what did I use recently?
Yeah, we have some.
Recently, I used the space story. I like
Oh yeah,
that, but I like to
yeah. It's like
change
a
it.
visualization exercise.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. I think, a lot of people have different ways of relaxing. So I mean, I wish we had more content. I think we have some good ones, but I don't have a strong opinion on what relaxes people, whether it's ASRM, like the weird noises, um, or these sleep stories, which a lot of people are attracted to now.
I think sleep stories are trending. I mean, I've seen that
Yeah.
a lot, which overall I would say nature sounds is my personal preference.
I
I
do
would,
ocean waves into
yeah.
dynamic mask into waking up to birds in the morning. That's
Okay, I
how I
have
roll.
right now I'm waking up to morning affirmations if I don't wake up
Oh yeah,
beforehand, but
Pablo has a great track on that.
yeah, I do like that. But I haven't used the bird sounds yet, but I think I would like that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
You made
so
my day.
oh yeah, awesome. No, I love it. So let's try to sum up what our recommendations are for the next week for people. I would say number one, just not to get in front of you, but I just want to say that people really should know their risk factors for a heart attack. It's really important. And that definitely does include, how much you sleep, but also if you don't sleep 6 hours and you have high blood pressure, then that's, I think, a very important consideration. But then also, of course, cholesterol. But the cholesterol myth is all about, it's not just the amount of cholesterol you have, it's whether or not it's oxidized. So that's all about the nutrients that are circulating. And if your vitamin D is low, then you need to be taking vitamin D and vitamin K too. Also, if you have plaquing, to take the plaquing away from the arteries. It's also really important, and you can kind of resolve that issue. Um, and there's and so anyway, you also want to eat nutrient rich, try to reduce your inflammation even over the next while, and then I'll let Dan finish what he wants to say.
I mean, my big thing is just sleep enough and align your circadian rhythm and prepare for it. If you wanted to really optimize, first off, just make sure you sleep enough. And that's going to be 90% of the solution. But if you really want to optimize and to sleep enough, you could either sleep beforehand too. So you can bank sleep to some degree. So you could actually, before that night, you can do a little power nap then, and so that'll also further ensure that you get enough sleep that night. That's called a prophylactic nap. There's actually different types of naps that you can take. Um, and then an appetitive nap would be once you're sleep deprived, to take one later in the day to make up for it, essentially. But then if you want to further optimize, try to shift the when you eat for your dinner, try to start shifting it 15 minutes earlier, about 3 days before the sleep deprivation, and then start trying to go to bed 15 minutes early each night.
So like Wednesday, we're going to give them a plan.
Yeah.
So Wednesday, they're going to start.
Exactly. So
eating
Wednesday,
their dinner.
Try to eat your dinner and go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Thursday, 15 minutes earlier than that. Friday, 15 minutes earlier than that. And then you're set for the shift.
Right. Okay. And then Saturday, I guess they could start at Thursday and still make it in time, but then they could also just repeat that Friday night on Saturday night.
Okay. All right. Shift it to Thursday, and then we have a plan. Sorry.
Okay. All right. I gave an extra day just in case it was beneficial, but it was okay.
It makes sense.
Okay. Well, I think that sounds like an awesome plan. I'm really glad we did this. I think this is like a really great public service announcement. I mean, given the fact that heart attacks are increased by 24%, that's nearly a quarter.
That's a great stat. Wow.
That's a humongous number. That's a humongous number.
Scary.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, very impressive science. No, just shows how important sleep is in cardiovascular health. And I mean, America's #1 killer still, I believe, is heart attack and stroke.
Yeah.
And so, especially, I mean, we're in New York City. I think everybody on this call is on New York City, but and so New Yorkers tend to work a lot, or, party a lot, whatever you're doing that deprives you of sleep, or just stay up late. But no matter where you're living, really important to get enough sleep. And I'm really happy to hear your recommendations for napping. I think that's awesome that you can kind of catch up on sleep, or protect yourself somehow by napping to some degree. To some degree.
Yeah.
Well, even if it's to some degree, then it will still reduce your risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for doing it. I really appreciate it. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Wow. A lot of information to take in. Wow. I guess what I have to say is that I don't have a schedule for anything, whether it's eating, whether it's sleeping. And I think it's become even worse since the pandemic, since I've been home a lot. So I don't have a regular eating schedule, sleeping schedule, which I've never did for quite some time. And so to hear all this information, with Dr. Daniel saying, as long as you get the sleep in, because I know at one point it was said that you should sleep between this time and this time. Like when I said before, when I apologized for coming in earlier, I said I had just taken a nap. Yet I had gotten like 7 hours sleep, but I didn't go to bed till like 2 o'clock in the morning because I am a night owl. So I usually don't go to bed until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, but I will get my 7, 8 hours, because if I don't have any appointments or anything, I usually sleep until 10, 11 o'clock. So I am getting the 8 hours sleeping. So I guess my question is, does it matter? Because they say you can't catch up on sleep. So when you talk about the cortisol level, or even the CRP, does it matter when you get those 8 hours? Like for someone like me that goes to bed so late?
So there's quite a bit of there's some contention in the literature about this, and I actually have an article in the New York Times about this very topic. And I'm of the party, and I think most people agree, that consistency is the most important thing. And because of our industrial society, that there's a preference for morning people. It's almost like more socially acceptable to be a morning person. But I think scientifically, consistency is key. So if you're consistent with being a night owl, I would say you're at no greater risk for negative outcomes than if you're a morning person. That being said, it might be difficult to maintain that consistency because society often forces us to have a meeting at 9 o'clock, for example. So, if you have a really flexible schedule, I would say it's fine what you're doing if you're getting enough sleep and being consistent, basically. But I mean, consistency is key for timing of meals and eating and exercising. And so I'm trying to be as consistent as possible for all those things. And what happens is when you are consistent, you have an aligned circadian rhythm and your sleep quality actually gets better. But it doesn't necessarily matter if you decide to be a morning person or an evening person, in my perspective, as long as you maintain that consistency.
Oh, because I find that when I try to go to bed earlier, I just have a hard time falling asleep. Because I guess I'm just, and Dr. Mully had brought up something where sometimes you don't even know that you're tired, but you're tired. But for some reason, I'll try to go to bed like at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and I'll toss and turn it. And then I just eventually have to get back up and do something because I just can't sleep. Whereas when I go to bed at 1, 2 o'clock, even if I have to get up in the middle of the night now to use the restroom, I have no problem using the restroom and going back and falling. I have no problem falling back asleep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be tricky for you to just all of a sudden go way earlier like that. Because you really should be, they say you should be tired when you're about to go to bed. So if you're not feeling like, I have a sense of when my body is ready to go to bed. And like, I know, and I can be a night owl too. And I completely relate to what you're saying. I would, if I were to go to bed at way earlier when I was a night owl, I would just know I wouldn't be able to do it and I wouldn't try. So I think what I would try to maybe do if I were you is to do it more, make the shift more gradually. And, try to start waking up a little bit earlier too. And that's going to naturally make you tired earlier. Because we get tired based on essentially how long we've been awake for. So I gradually reduce your, how early you wake up in the morning. And then you'll gradually also start to get tired earlier.
But Dr. Millie and I have had this conversation, and I did try it for a while, and then I went back to my old ways. And I find that if I do get up earlier, and I can usually tell when I really need more sleep because my eyes will still be burning me. But then I'll get up. But then what ends up happening, like happened today, was I ended up, because I was still tired, then I end up taking a nap like around 4:30 or so. So then that puts me back on the clock, so that
that's
now
the problem.
I'm not. Yeah.
So in
So
your
now
case,
I'm not gonna
I
be
would not
sleepy
nap.
tonight.
I would not nap in your case.
Okay.
But obviously, like, weigh this with trying to get enough sleep too. It's a little tricky.
It's tricky, but she doesn't really need to change her sleep. She's just doing it because I said it's better. Or like, she thinks it's better to sleep early.
If it's going to affect my health.
I mean, maybe it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a problem. I think I need to maybe learn a little more.
Yeah.
I think you're giving her the green light to sleep how she wants.
Yeah, essentially.
She's raising it because I've contradicted that in the past.
Well, so. I mean, all I'm saying
but not only that, but just in terms of what you said, in terms of affecting my health also. And like I said, my CRP is elevated because I think it's like 5. And then I know that from some reading that I did, it also affects weight gain. And then if you're insulin resistant and all of that. So that's why I'm trying to change, because maybe that's why it's so difficult for me to lose the weight, and my CRP is constantly elevated.
I mean, sometimes it's like all these things are factors and they add up together. And so you address one and you can try to start addressing sort of all of them together. And that can maybe start shifting the behavior a little bit more. But I would also try to make sure you're eating 3 square meals a day too, to get the regularity.
Yeah, because see, that's off too. I just eat, I won't have, I might go and not have breakfast, have lunch, and maybe not have lunch
No,
and have
yeah,
dinner.
this
I
is
have no
this
set
is
schedule for anything.
this is the essence of the problem. I think skipping breakfast might be a mistake for you.
Mm.
If you do want to shift it a little bit, or I mean, I look, if you could really be consistent with being a total night owl, then I think that could be okay. But just frankly, our society a lot of times is not okay. I don't know if you fall into that scenario or not. But
No, I really don't tend to go with what society,
okay.
society says.
She's
this.
retired.
I'm
Okay.
just, so it's like, it's just that I skip breakfast because, like I said, I go to bed late. I mean, sometimes I'm up till 5 o'clock in the morning. And so by the time I do get up, it's like 10, 11. So
But that
breakfast
seems
time,
unhealthy, because then you're not getting the sunlight and you're basically functioning like a shift worker, and it's throwing off your whole rhythm. I
Yeah.
would try not to do the wake up. Look, if you're like consistently like 1 to 2, fine. But
Mhm.
if you're finding yourself pushing into like the 3, 5, you're going to
Mhm.
start running into issues being able to even align with the sun.
Mm.
You know, you can try to get one of these happy lamps too, which is what I use to make sure I always get sun during the day.
Oh, okay.
But
Which one do you recommend, Dan?
I use the Verilux one.
Okay.
It's like $49.99.
Verilux,
Yeah.
and it's called a sun lamp
Happy lamp,
or
Verilux.
happy lamp.
Yep.
Okay.
They use it for like seasonal affective disorder, or
Yeah,
seasonal
Yeah.
affective disorder.
because I think winter is really bad for me. I tend to be more depressed in the winter.
Because you're
And
not getting
just
the
like
light.
fighting.
So
Yeah.
I would get this. I think it might be important for you to get this little contraption to simulate the light.
Okay.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Delia, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
passionate presence as always. And thanks so much for being here, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Okay. Have a great one, everyone. Thank you,
Oh,
Dr. Daniel.
my pleasure. Thank
All
you.
right, bye-bye.